The year was 2003. Wrestling was one of my escapes from boring school. And, well, the wait for the next Raw or SmackDown episode was excruciating at times. Now, for countless teens like me, WWE was the hit that you needed almost every single day. We didn't have Netflix or any of these OTTs where you could, just watch whatever you wanted. And frankly, we didn't even care about wrestling being fake or real. That's a debate for another time. We just enjoyed WWE of that time, the countless storylines, uh, the characters, because the wrestling at that time was a completely different business compared to what it is now. Now, obviously, it would be a huge lie if a teenage boy like me didn't tune into WWE in the early 2000s for the divas. Tori Wilson, Sable, Stacy Keibler, uh, Trish Stratus, you get the drift. But I won't be going deep into that. WWE was pure excitement for 2, 3 hours. And then, you also had recap shows like Velocity and Heat, uh, which used to cater to my wrestling demands. This was also the time when I got a PS2. I did have a PS1, but obviously getting the PS2 was the next thing. And my parents were sick and tired of me badgering them when I wanted to go to the arcades and play games with better graphics. So I was given that as a birthday gift, and there were 2 or 3 games that I could pick up. FIFA 2002 was one of the games. Here Comes the Pain was obviously one, and then GTA Vice City. I might do an episode on GTA Vice City later because it still is one of the greatest games I've ever played. But this one's purely for Here Comes the Pain. Here Comes the Pain had Brock Lesnar on the cover, front and center. It was then when Brock Lesnar made a big name for himself by bursting into the scene. He was menacing. He had that power, the strength. He had the character. He had Paul Heyman. And he still remains someone that you don't want to mess with even now. This was a game that I used to play almost every day if I could, especially during the weekends. I would try to finish off the season mode with a custom character, even my favorite character from the time, Edge. And Here Comes the Pain was also a game that you wanted to play with your friends. It was absolute carnage from the first minute, and most importantly, it was easy to pick up and fun to play. Now, this was an era where gameplay was fast paced and arcade like, and didn't have so many buttons and commands to map and to learn different move sets. It was very intuitive. In fact, when I picked this up nearly 20 years later after last playing this, I was in the groove within minutes, reversing finishers using weapons, and of course, going backstage to beat the crap out of opponents. SmackDown Here Comes the Pain was fun. It was bloody, it was brutal, but it gave you that quick, hit of adrenaline you needed when you're playing the game. This still remains, the most fun I've had in a wrestling game. Well, since Here Comes the Pain. Tried quite a few iterations of the PS4 and the PS5 era games. I just tried 2K24, and while that is good, it's still not Here Comes the Pain. Now, talking about the gameplay, there were a ton of new features added to the game when compared to the previous versions. A better grappling system where each directional button led to a specific grapple. So you had power moves, submission moves, quick attacks, and obviously signature moves. And almost every wrestler had some of the signature moves mapped as well. Rey Mysterio had his high flying moves. Uh, Undertaker had his moves, etc. Obviously, the number of moves in that game is limited compared to what we have these days because obviously it's more powerful machinery and bigger games. But this still had some novel features, like there was a mini game to escape submissions or to escape pins, and the gameplay felt perfect. Just the perfect balance between arcade and simulation. Uh, One of the really cool bits was you could target an opponent's body parts like arms, legs, torso, or head, and then indicator would show how much damage that they had taken. Edge's finisher in this case in this game is the execution. So if you keep targeting your opponent's head and you can use the execution to finish matches early. There's quite a bit of realism in here as well. Blood would spew out of the head. Like those baiting days. If the head of the opposition was targeted a lot, players walk around groggily or limp if certain body parts are excessively targeted. The matches also felt like, it was like a broadcast show. The fans would cheer for faces and boo the heels. At one point, when Eddie Guerrero, the late great Eddie Guerrero, was being beat up by myself, the fans started shouting for Eddie. in hopes of giving him the boost that he needs. Camera angles showcase moves that could injure opponents, or it would show how strong the move is, how much impact it had, and most importantly, the gameplay felt smooth. It was arcadey, of course, but had a bit of simulation and easily remains the most fun I've had in a wrestling game. There was a bit of a downside, obviously. No commentary. You got subtitles for Jerry the King Lawler or when you're going backstage with your players, but not having their voices, it felt a little off. Now, when you're talking about match types, SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain, had a ton of them. So initially, there are 8 different match types that you can check out. But then once you get into the main events, that's when the real things happen. Like you've got the Elimination Chamber, you've got Hell in the Cell, you've got a hardcore match, you've got tag matches, which are tornado tag matches, you've got manager matches. There were 2 matches that were added for the first time in Here Comes the Pain. The Hell in a Cell. Sorry, no. So there were 2 matches that were added into this game. One was obviously the Elimination Chamber, which is huge. And then the very divisive Brand Panties match, and I won't be talking much about that. Uh, you've got some really classics here also, like a gauntlet match and a survival match. 3 Stages of Hell is also fun, and of course, First Blood, Last Man Standing, and hardcore matches. Now, hardcore matches were really fun at the time because you can unlock a lot of backstage areas to go to. For example, I was able to unlock the Times Square region, and there is a helicopter you can climb up and try to attack your opponent. I messed it up quite a lot when I was doing this video. Uh, but it was fun, and you could use a lot of weapons of the people. Obviously, the weapons that are within the ring are your normal. There's a mallet, I think. There's a table, there's a ladder, and the steel chair. But when you're background, like you're taking people out in backstage, not background, but backstage, you have crazy weapons. Like you can use a forklift, you can use a motorcycle, you can use uh, a trolley, a shopping cart. It's crazy. And the best part is none of these weapons break. You can just spam them like crazy. You've got the Royal Rumble, obviously, which is like the biggest thing. But the fun thing is you can finish a proper Royal Rumble match within 10 to 15 minutes, which is good for your quick gameplay. Now, story mode is the big reason why I loved Here Comes the Pain, and I still love it to this day. Uh, Here Comes the Pain really upped the ante when it came to the story mode. You can take a creative star or you can take a WWE male star from the roster and have a go. You can basically either take the present stats of a wrestler, or you can take the stats from being zero and slowly build them up. It's basically a road to WrestleMania, and that's the real great thing of it. The main aim is to get to WrestleMania and fight for the title. Now, depending on your superstar points, this is based on the wins and your actions backstage. And when you're interacting with other players, you can challenge for titles. And the really great part is every single day or every single week that you pass, there is a story around it. You can ask the GM for a title shot. He can turn you down. He, she, because there's Eric Bischoff and Stephanie McMahon for Raw and or SmackDown. And if you think things aren't going well for you, you can ask for a switch and go to a different brand. For example, this is just part of one storyline. I got the chance to team up with Brock Lesnar, The Undertaker, and created my own faction. I was also tag champs with the Big Show, which had its own separate storyline. And there's so many different things that can happen. Like when I won the Royal Rumble, there was a storyline where Matt Hardy claimed my character's feet also touched the ground at the same time, and I shouldn't go to WrestleMania. Then, as usual, Vince McMahon came into the scene and tried to screw me out of the title shot. It felt natural and exactly like a storyline would go in WWE back in the day. There are a lot of animated segments and promos too, although it is without any voices, but I think that's a small price to pay for gameplay and graphics. Obviously, for their time, it was really great. As I said, the season ends with your clash at Mania. There is The Rock giving you a huge pep talk before your big match. WWE giving me a grand entrance like HBK coming down from the ceiling. And after the match is over, there is this montage where you show that there's blood, sweat, tears, and you finally become a champion. Now, the really cool thing is that you can start the next season as the champion. You can make changes to the roster, and there will be slight tweaks to the storyline. But obviously, a lot of things are repeated. So yeah, that's one of the negative features of this season mode. Now, when we talk about the roster, I won't be talking about the creation suit much because it was really good at that time, but obviously this depends totally on your creativity. I created somebody like a superhero kind of guy who had crazy flying moves and also a lot of kicks. So it was fun to play with him. But you could make female and male characters and you could add them to the season mode. So you could really make a large roster. So that's totally up to you. Now, they had over 50 names in this game, which is a little low compared to what we get nowadays. But again, uh, it is the best that you could do for that time. But they still missed out on quite a few big names. As stated earlier, some of the names in the game are Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, John Cena, Lesnar, Kane, The Big Show, Kurt Angle, Goldberg. And the female superstars are there like Trish Stratus, Tori Wilson, Lita, etc. The really cool part is you could actually unlock a lot of alternate personas by winning cash throughout the campaign. Like Undertaker had a different persona, Kane has a persona with or without the mask, and you could also unlock some legends within the game, like the Iron Sheik and a few more. So that really, made grinding the game fun and cool. Uh, there were a lot of there are a lot of unlockables as well. Like there is the Divas loading screens. Again, I won't be talking much about that. But overall, it wasn't a bad roster by any means. But of course, it could have been much better. And nowadays, obviously, the rosters have hundreds of wrestlers to select from. So obviously, things have improved in that. Now, given this was one of the best games to come out at the time, it doesn't come as a surprise that Here Comes the Pain sold millions of copies. The PS2 sales were 2.8 million. That's the only platform it came out with. Some reports say it was 1.6, but I still believe it is one of the best-selling PS2 games. It was obviously uh, the reception and the reviews from a lot of the websites were great. Most of them rated it 8.5 or higher. It was only the Japanese magazine Famitsu which gave it a 29 out of 40. Uh, Maybe they didn't like WWE, I don't know, but most of the reviews for this game were very good. Now, when we talk about the legacy of this game, obviously, a lot of WWE fans love this game, and this was an introduction to wrestling games to a whole generation of players. This is an incredible game for all those who haven't had fun in the older generations. I would highly recommend this. And there was also this tribute video kind from the WWE that was released, which had the likes of Xavier Woods and Johnny Gargano and all talking about the game and saying how much they love this game and how this got them introduced into gaming. Uh, Even there's this video of Shelton Benjamin, who I do believe is a bit of a legend, who came to have won several competitions in the WWE during that time. And there's also a clip of him beating Kane on the PS2. However, this was the end of the so-called SmackDown series. As WWE started with the SmackDown versus Raw games, it makes sense because SmackDown isn't the only brand that WWE had. So marketing-wise, obviously, you would want the other brand names there. So SmackDown versus Raw, SmackDown versus Raw 2006, that's just came out. Of course, those games had major improvements, better rosters, better gameplay, better storylines. But I'll still end this video by saying SmackDown Here Comes the Pain is still such a fun and fresh game to try out. There isn't anything, you know, that is present in current generation and games of having to be constantly online or behind paywalls or loot boxes. It's just fun arcadey action that anybody can pick up and enjoy. And I would thoroughly recommend anyone having a PlayStation 2 or even emulator to try this game out because it is exceptionally fun.